Hey everybody, I am currently traveling in Israel, Tel Aviv to be precise, and that means Daniel and I were not able to record again at our usual time last Friday. So enjoy this episode from way back, January 3rd, and we should be back this week with a new recording ready for you next Tuesday. So enjoy. Can't wait to get a haircut. I'm getting a little too redneckish.
Well, how do you hair? You have a very eclectic, multiple different styles across your self-portraits of the years.
Yeah, my hair does whatever it wants, and it's usually just kind of a poof.
I'm very jealous of your little silver streaks. One day,
Yes,
I will have them.
Those are COVID hairs.
Oh, congrats!
Pre-COVID, I had some gray. I've always had a bit here, nothing like this. But post-COVID, yeah.
Then the world fell apart, and you got a little stressed. Who could have guessed?
So I should give you a tour someday, yeah? Kind of tough on the laptop, but this is the main floor with the bedroom.
Yeah.
That is the bedroom. And the bathroom's right there, and there's a nice shower bath. So this is floor number 2. Below is the living room and kitchen, and upstairs is the cool little
nook,
like desk recording space.
Are you currently giving a tour of your apartment to our audio-based audience?
We do have video of all this. I'm anticipating some YouTube listeners, I think. What is your preference on that? Do you enjoy watching podcasts?
This is okay. How far are we in now? This is like episode 5 or something in our test. This is a wonderful time to make a confession.
Oh no.
I don't listen to podcasts
At all?
No.
None?
None.
Oh.
None. I've listened to like 3 in my life accidentally. As everyone did, I listened to S-Town, not Serial. For everyone that thought I was about to say Serial, that's very rude. But I was on a train from like middle of nowhere, Austria to Paris, and it was like a 9-hour train ride. And an 8-hour podcast called S-Town exploded on the internet like 2 days before. And I was like, what's this? So then I just listened to that while on a train for 9 hours because I had the time. And then I've listened to my podcasts that I've been on in that okay. I've listened to my guest spots because I'm like, okay, I need to make sure I didn't say anything dumb. Because I go into a semi-fugue state where I'm just like, oh yeah, we're just talking, but then I'm like, oh wait, I am like representing my life's work and the company that I am building. So I nervously
am I actually answering the questions that they originally asked me? And I have to admit, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean and I have a lot when I'm thinking, right? I say as the person editing this, I'm sure you know that. And so I try to, I'm trying to get better at that for you, but also just for myself.
Taking an awareness beat, a breath. I do a thing that's like I do this, yeah. And what's funny, when you edit enough podcasts, you actually start to be able to see via the waveform shape when it's likely an and or an or of course the little tick that I do is very obvious because it's just one little blip, but I can anticipate the from you and be able to edit it out without even listening. So it actually gets pretty fast and natural.
Oh, so no one knows I Great. Okay.
They won't. You're going to sound very smart, and I'm going to cut every part of every argument where I sound silly.
Perfect. I love
the
that
power
for
of
me.
editing. I would like to mention, though, S-Town, incredible, if anybody's listening and has not heard it. I believe it was the same producers, showrunners, whatever you call them for podcasts, that did Serial. I think it was the second. So it was very well produced, and you brought it up, and I said, yeah, I saw that, because it is so well produced that you have these very vivid, and I'm not much of a visual person, but I have this vivid experience of what it was like to listen to that whole podcast. It was so, so good. Mind-blowing.
Yeah, I felt many emotions while, sitting in a train alone. So that was very nice. But other than that, I don't really listen to podcasts. And this is not...
Everyone needs that one thing. They're just completely off the radar from the rest of
Oh, no, that's not this. For me, the off the radar thing is I've never had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That's my...
Are you allergic to peanuts?
No. When I was 5, we were on a family camping trip to Yellowstone, and we got stuck behind some bison, and we were in a traffic jam for like 3 or 4 hours. Very common Yellowstone experience. Sure. I was very hungry, and my mom made us peanut butter sandwiches, and I got dehydrated in the car from just being in the car for so long, not drinking water or whatever, and I got my very first migraine as a child. Had a terrible time. Was just like silently weeping in the back of the car, laying under a blanket because my head felt like it was exploding, and my very young body connected that to peanut butter sandwiches. Not, severe dehydration and a predisposition to migraines. And so by the time I realized what had happened, I was like, I've gone so far.
Could do without. Like, that's fine. Okay, that is pretty up there. That's shocking. I don't have them regularly, but I'm a big fan.
I've had toast with like jam, right? And I've had peanut butter on toast.
Separate. Okay. Yeah.
And so, like, I can imagine what it's like, and it's like, that's fine, I guess.
Well, okay, if you're ever going to do it right, and go get the Potbellies. Potbellies, the sandwich, they have an amazing PB&J on the menu.
Okay. Is there a Potbellies in Baltimore?
Oh, sure.
Okay, yeah, great. I'll just swing by, have my very first when
it's
we're
like
visiting.
A gourmet PB&J, so
I'm a gourmet man. So that's wonderful.
I bet you it wouldn't have any triggering flashbacks. I'm so sorry.
The reason I haven't listened to podcasts is very simple. I can't work while I listen to people talking. I can listen to music with lyrics. I can, I'm a writer. It's pretty rare for folks to be able to listen to music.
Even music
writing.
with lyrics, right? Yeah,
yeah.
Music have you familiar with Brain FM? It's an app, but it's essentially just a really well curated playlist. Brain FM.
Brain FM, love it.
It's a music app that is just like everything is tuned toward concentration or exercise or sleep, and almost none of them have any type of lyrical stuff because it's meant to be a productivity booster. And you're exactly right. The lyrics or a podcast, like ideas and words filling your brain, I would imagine as a writer, it's like the last thing you could want.
my partner is also a writer, and she can't do words at all, right? Like if there's any words in the music, she can't write to it. She like when she's writing, she's listening to like classical piano, and I'm over here listening to like disco or hip hop. Well, writing my little blog posts or my little novellas. And it's what? Do you not write a novella?
No, I don't think so.
This is we're in 2023 now. This is going to be the year that I listen to podcasts. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, there's a podcast I was listening to. It used to be very popular. It's one of the earlier kind of more viral podcasts between two YouTubers called Hello Internet. First of all, fantastic name for a podcast. They're not computer science or programmers anyway, but they're both fairly techie kind of YouTubers. They're both educational YouTubers. His name is CGP. I think CGP
Gray and Brady Heron. Yeah.
They're on indefinite hiatus, unfortunately, after quite a good run. But CGP Gray is quite well known for his animated info YouTube videos, very well researched and deep. And he comes from a background of teaching, so he seems to know what he's doing. But what they talk about a lot on their podcast, back when it was active, was like workflow and awareness of your habits in life, because essentially you only have so much energy to expend in maybe 3 or 4 different categories that everybody kind of has to deal with. And he had a wonderful metaphor about how you can kind of picture a row of maybe 4 light bulbs on a rack, and you only have a certain amount of power inputting them, and you can kind of dial one up and one down. They can never be completely off, and it was just, anyway, lovely. But one of the things he pointed out was that podcasts specifically, because they are so, these days, very long form, can kind of rob you of your own thoughts without you even realizing it, because you're just constantly inputting all these other people's ideas, and you might have a reaction to things, but they are driving the conversation.
Yeah.
You need to be very careful about the podcast you listen to, especially if they're not story based, right? Because then you're not getting, at least story based podcasts like S Town is almost like an audiobook in a lot of ways, which I would say is just notably different than a podcast. So you want to be kind of, and I've talked about this before, which nobody has heard yet. You want to be very selfish with your time and make sure those inputs that you're consuming don't affect any of your ability to output. So anyway.
Should we start? I don't know. You work with me on this. Should we start like a little fictional story? Should this be like Night Vale? See, that's a podcast. That's a podcast. That's a fictional story. I know these things. Listen, it's because I've never had a commute. My problem is I've never commuted anywhere.
Okay.
I've been working remotely or 2 minutes away from my office my entire life.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I do quite a lot of driving. I don't commute every day, but the average driving distance to get to a wedding is about an hour, hour and a half, sometimes 2. And then, of course, travel anywhere else on a plane or something. It's, easy to fill that with podcasty type stuff. But one of my favorite things, though, is to like chores that I really hate around the house, like doing laundry or dishes, outdoor stuff with the pool, whatever. That is prime podcast time because it makes it an enjoyable task that I'm actually sort of looking forward to because I can, different than watching a movie or something, you can do physical things while listening to a podcast. It's wonderful.
I am sorry. I blacked out at pool. There's a pool? I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of
There's no pool here, but yes, I have a pool at Army Road, the A-frame, yes.
Future that's a future friend problem, not a now problem.
It is a heated.
We can't dedicate an episode to the decision making behind your pools.
Well, it was there when I got it. It's not like I
love
honestly that. I don't know that I would recommend anyone owning a pool. It's quite the
it is a lot of chemistry.
It's like owning a boat in a lot of ways. It's unbelievable. It's like, oh, this one O-ring is kind of rotted out. They don't make it anymore. It's $300. It's like, this is a piece of rubber. What are you talking about? I'm going to duct tape this.
Just buy a 3D printer and start printing your own pool parts.
Have you done much 3D printing? That's actually an interesting point to bring up. I own a 3D printer. I've done a lot in terms of just experimenting, but nothing really that helpful or serious. It's just a fun little hobby. But I recently purchased my first 3D printed item on Etsy because it was so specific to what I needed. And I'm shocked there aren't actual products, but the Apple display, I have the XDR Pro display. It doesn't have a webcam, which is the worst thing ever. But the new iPhones have fantastic continuity abilities to just wirelessly shoot the high quality cameras from your iPhone directly to your MacBook or whatever. Great, except there's no way to mount this thing on my screen so that it looks like I'm, looking at who I'm talking with or what have you. And so this person created these 3D mounted MagSafe things that would just sit on top of, like wedge itself on top of the edge of the display. And then you add a little MagSafe magnet and it just snaps on it. It's perfect. But it broke, unfortunately. It wasn't
a well printed piece.
For $20 should not have broken. It should have included the plans to print it myself if anything broke.
Why don't you just buy the plans to print them yourself?
I know, right? Like I used to be very active on Thingiverse or whatever, all the various communities of people just sharing. You're right, I should do that. But 3D printing is a double-edged sword because it's so slow.
As someone that actively, professionally benefits from your adoration of online communities and hopping into new places, which is great for us, how do you do it? Right? Like, so Sam and I have a shared notes file where we talk about like ideas for the podcast and communicate. And one of yesterday for today's potential episode, he wrote down 900 things, give or take a few. And I was like, "Oh, what's going on?" And he was like, "I'm just yelling at Redditors." And you've mentioned that you're a moderator, an inactive moderator for like one of the subreddits for wedding photography, right?
I'm medium active, but
right, medium active. You regularly argue with people on Reddit in photography subreddits. You're very active on Glass. You're very active on Instagram. You used to be active on 3D printing. 3D printing web.
Oh, we haven't even talked about gearspace.com, which is where it all started. It was wonderful and is still a very active forum for audio engineers and such.
Gearspace.com. Yep, let's start there.
Do you remember?
No,
did you?
Because I'm not an audio engineer.
Yeah, okay. It used to have a different name. Thank God they rebranded. Only about a year ago, though. They used to be called gearsluts.com.
Oh,
yeah. It's like, but we're talking like, it's probably been around. I don't. V Bulletin, I think, is the platform they run it on. Something really old. I don't know if that's the name. It's probably been around 20 years at least.
Back when casual misogyny was fine on the internet,
exactly.
As opposed to like a business problem.
Hey, props to them. I'm sure it's the same guys running it. I assume they're men. I'm almost certain of that. That at least did rebrand, because that was not a small undertaking for an established place of 20 years. I don't know how I do it. I just kind of. I don't know, carve out time, and I take it in bursts. I'll go like a week without even looking at Reddit, and then just like it all comes out in 4 hours of not being able to sleep well. So I just like start. And I'm not a fantastic community builder, by the way, but I do try and take. It's not. I've found very effective on Reddit to take this approach, but I do try and push back against just the fluffy sort of. I don't want to say supportive, because I'm not trying to not be supportive, but it's important to be concise and blunt and just like, this is helpful or this is not helpful. If it's not helpful, here's why I think that is. Usually that gets you downvoted into oblivion, so the conversation really doesn't get much good back and forth. It never really ever seems to come to a healthy conclusion on Reddit, which is very unfortunate. I hate that about that platform. But
there are a lot of things that are wrong with Reddit. So
But I find over time, when you have this, I don't want to say contrarian, but I do try and find, at least as a starting point, like what is a different perspective to whatever the issue at hand is. And if I actually know what I'm talking about or not, what is the fastest way to push back at this in a way that I think would help provide some clarity if somebody is willing to listen? Because I get that all the time. I try and also, when I'm reading what other people have said anywhere on any community, like make sure and check myself. I've used PickTime for years. They have a very active Facebook group, and quite often I come across posts where people are doing something differently on PickTime, which I'd never realized or thought about, and it's so valuable. That's just one example of the point I'm trying to drive home. But I don't have kids and much of a social life. That's part of the trade-off of being a wedding photographer. All my friends are wedding photographers, and many of them have kids now. So it's very.
So you see each other once a year at your workshop,
yes.
or your.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. There's a lot of fun information in here. That's neat.
Okay. I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting thing, right? It doesn't matter if it's helpful or not. People are going to be who they're going to be on communities anyway, right? Like you're not a radically different human being on the internet versus in person. That used to be a thing, right? Like that's everybody true. Used to have like their online persona and then their in-person persona. There was it happened a lot on Twitter in the early Twitter days when like you'd be a character. A good example of that would be like Mike Montero. He's a really great designer. He had a creative morning talk go viral years ago called "Fuck You, Pay Me," and then he wrote a book about it. And like he's an asshole on the internet, and everyone's like, "Man, your persona makes me really sad on the internet because you were such a nice human being in person." And so, like there are a lot of problems with the oversharing and commodification of your life and making content 24/7 and you being the center of your content universe and trying to sell your life as a product and or a brand. But one of the nice things about it, one of the very few nice things about this shift is that like people are a lot more honest and vulnerable on the internet. Like publicly on large spaces, right? You'd find it on like forums and like small groups and, like tiny Flickr groups or whatever. But now people will just put whatever they, put a massive vulnerability on the internet, on Twitter or on a YouTube or whatever. And like, that's a lot of terrible things happen when that is a lie. Sure. Shout out to the Try Guys, the Try Guy, Mr.
I don't know who that is.
Oh,
you mean it's awful? Like people like fake vulnerability. Is that what you're saying?
Listen, I don't want to get too far into it. Try Guys are a YouTube channel
Okay.
from the BuzzFeed days, and they
I should
spun
just
out
note
on
YouTube
their
is
own.
my blind spot. So YouTube is to me what podcasts are to you. So continue.
Noted. So YouTube, Try Guys is a very popular for men trying things they've never tried before. It was a bit for BuzzFeed. They spun out. They're wildly popular, and one of the wife guy on of the four, he was like the noted wife guy, like had an affair and blew up his life with one of his employees, and so they like to the remaining Try Guys, the try guys, the three try. TRI.
So this is
Guys.
TRI, yes.
Yeah, this happened like 3 or 4 months ago. Kicked him out, and we're like, yeah, this is super, this is super bad, and he is no longer a part of our company, and got kicked out of his multi-million-dollar production company, and had like real consequences, which was awesome. But he was, lying, bad. So
Yeah,
that's the example of like bad.
I see. Yes.
Not real vulnerability.
Something you mentioned was the. Or I should say, one of my big frustrations, and I'm curious if you think the vulnerability that is much more, I don't know, readily available and willing to be accepted and put out there, do you think that is a consequence that is, or should I say, is it enhanced by the ability to be anonymous? Or do you think more people that are actually not a character and true to themselves tend to be more vulnerable? Did that come out right?
Yeah.
Or do you think people that are able to hide behind a bit of anonymity are a little bit more vulnerable? Or do you think it's a wash?
I mean, it depends on the person, right? Like I grew up in Idaho. I grew up in a very religious home. I also knew that or thought, because I was 9 and was in a sheltered religious home, I didn't, understand that there were multiple different sexualities. It was either you're straight and going to heaven or you're gay and going to hell, right? And so because I had a crush on Heath Ledger in A Knight's Tale, I knew I was going to hell, right? Like he smiles in that like first scene and it's like, oh my God, right? So I spent the entirety of my early teen years pretending and like existing solely online, right? Like solely in an online space as myself, right? And then I was, like charading as a straight Republican at my Jesus school and then my Jesus weekend things. And so, like I
Very
was
familiar. Yes.
So I was, like in my heart, I was a gay kid who was going to hell and everything was bad. But the internet was the only spot that I could safely pretend or not pretend, right? Like safely explore any version of my sexuality and what that looked like. And so, but I did that anonymously, right? Like,
okay. So it's likely just totally context based.
Right. But then there are other people
yeah.
who use the, like online anonymity to just be like raging assholes or Nazis. And so there's
fair point. Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of my huge frustrations because I'm not active anywhere in an anonymous way, even on Reddit, which is probably a bad decision by me. I link to my Patreon and the wedding photography Reddit. I link right to my site. Would not be hard for anybody to see that I'm an actual real person, and it's very frustrating because I do get into a back and forth with somebody, and I realize I have no idea who I'm talking to. Like, they might be making good points here, but I disagree with them. So they don't sound so good to me right now. But if I had, and I'll often say this in the wedding photography subreddit, and it gets downvoted to oblivion. It's like, okay, let me see your work. Like, I want to see your work. Like, who are you? Who's this person? And it's an endless source of frustration for me because I feel like if you're gonna put an opinion out there or engage regularly, let's say with a community, maybe not randomly some place or some conversation on Twitter or what have you, but I feel like there's so much more value in just saying, okay, yeah, I'm a real person and this is where you can find my work, especially if you're in a community related to wedding photography. Yeah, I feel like everything I say should be taken a little bit more seriously and have by default a little bit more value. Please tell me if that just sounds arrogant and stupid. Okay, maybe it's a trap. But I don't want. I'm just very not willing, unless I know the person by username and know who they are, like very resistant to take anything they say seriously, because I want to know more context than just their 3 sentences trying to explain something. I need to know their backstory. So, I've gotten into people in depth about lighting and composition, and eventually found their work, and they're awful photographers. And everything they say now, and started to shape my opinion about a topic, I want immediately ejected from my brain. I wish I'd known that in the moment. I'm sorry.
There are so many ways around this, such as not using Reddit. I think is going to be the simplest solution for you. But
it mostly happens with the wedding photography subreddit, and it's full of very great people with very useful conversations. I find it's a valuable community, way more so than any Facebook group communities, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, come on.
I know. Anyway, but I just find it interesting. And one thing I noted here in our next episode topics, which is why I kind of started talking in this direction, was this idea that I think a company like Apple would be able to pull off. And I'm just curious if your opinion, if you've ever heard anything about it. I think it would never really catch on, but it just seems like a lot of issues with social media and the fabric of society right now would be solved by kind of having 2 versions of the internet. One being the way it is now, the Wild West. You can be anonymous, you can be not, whatever, you can be a character. Yeah. And one being essentially verified, and having an equivalent of an Apple sign-on ID that is deeply tied to Safari, and Apple would have to then do the legwork of like, you want access through these websites through Safari, then you have to be verified as a user. Now, we've talked about this a bit as it related to Glass, and it is still easy to create a fake Apple whatever. But I think it would be fascinating to imagine an internet where you could actually only have access to certain platforms or sites if you had a certain layer. Nobody needs to know where you live or anything like that. This is a certain layer of like, hey, I'm a person.
I have a quick qualifying question before I respond to the premise of the idea of an Apple, like Apple ID only internet or verified internet. Did you remember that? Did you forget? I guess is the better way to phrase this. Did you forget that fascists exist and sometimes run the government?
That's a good point.
Because a new law that literally just went into place in Louisiana 2 days ago is you have to put your driver's license number into Pornhub.com to access Pornhub in Louisiana.
Interesting.
Which is some terrible internet stuff, right? But like part of the reason that I don't want a centralized internet to exist in that way, and why I think that the push towards centralized platforms such as Facebook and Twitter, and we like compressed the web to link in the bio, is super sad and depressing for a lot of reasons. But one of the main reasons is like the internet is the greatest equalizer we've ever had in human history, right? Like it's especially clear on Twitter, or was until a billionaire bought it and is ruining it, where like a normie could literally destroy a millionaire's day or a billionaire's afternoon, right? Like just body them, call them to account, or just make a joke, like a men's right activist, Andrew Tate, is currently in prison because he tried to bait Greta Thunberg, and she destroyed him via a tweet, and he couldn't let it go, and then was verified to be in the country where he has been sex trafficking women, and was detained by Romanian officials because of a pizza box.
Did he have a previous relationship, like back and forth, banter, bad, like whatever, beef with her? So what's interesting, I read in an article related to his arrest that the group in Romania, the police force that actively were seeking him out and monitoring his socials, the acronym for whatever it was GRETA. And I think he may just be stupid enough, not that I know anything about this guy, to have latched on to some whatever spark that happened between them, that like she, because I think he called her out first, whatever the
So I mean, like as all men's right activists and alt-right personalities do, they say batshit, just awful things
I think he
on the
thought
internet.
this group was her. And
No. He very clearly,
hilarious
because he tweeted about his luxury cars, because he has many luxury cars, and he was filling up like a very dumb photo of him filling up a luxury car, and was like, "Hello, I have this many Maseratis. Fuck you, like send me an email." And she was like, "Cool, do that," and then made a joke about get a life at smalldick.energy or something like that. Not
my favorite choice of an email, I'm going to say, but continue.
Not great. But then he responded and was arrested because he was
with the video with the pizza box that it was a business that was there. But like the original, anyway, I just found it. If it were true, I'm sure this is just internet randomness, but that he mistakenly latched on to her as a person to just like throw random shit at, because this group was also the acronym. Was GRETA, would be
so
freaking
our
hilarious.
To go back to the point of like a verified internet, like a verified internet is, there's a lot of power in anonymity. That word is really hard for me to say.
Yeah, no, I always hold back from really wanting to say it until I'm anonymity.
When I was 12, I was at summer camp, and on the last day of summer camp, you spent the afternoon writing notes and sending them to everyone else, so you could like exchange emails or phone numbers, or tell the cute guy that you like him, whatever. And I was confessing my love for someone in a note, and I couldn't spell anonymous correctly. And so like my counselor didn't know how to spell anonymous. We called over multiple staff members, no one knew. So it ended up just being like -an scribble a and so like scribbled it out, and then under all of the scribbles wrote author unknown.
Wow.
Because I knew how to spell
high
author.
drawer.
Highbrow.
That's amazing. That would get my attention if somebody wrote that on a note. Author.
3 years later, we went on a date. It was great. I brought her a blanket back from Mexico, and then her mom yelled at me for taking her on a date. It was a whole thing. Anyway, anonymous internet. I don't know. It's terrifying. But as a member of the staff that runs an online community, Apple ID also like saved our lives, right? Like there's no way that we could have scaled up as quickly as we did to where we did without Apple ID only, right? Like that being tied to someone's name, tied to a credit card, was a big deal for us from like a trust and safety standpoint. And so like I understand the draw to it. Right. And
just so many of the manipulation tactics that are employed for political and other reasons seem to leverage bots and bot farms quite a lot. And if there existed a version, I'm not saying the entirety of the internet, but a version where it was vastly filled with some layer of actual verified, not Twitter blue check verified, pay $8 and you're done, but actually some very basic level, it would be nice. I think.
Okay, what tech company do you trust to do this?
I don't. That's the problem. But you like a single sign-on that exists now, you standardize it and have it be. You pick your company of choice. Now, obviously, I don't know. That doesn't really solve the problem because they're all kind of bad in their own way. You're right. But
and they all are fighting each other, and there's no interoperability between them. Did I get that one right? That one sounded right.
Interoperability. Yeah, I don't know, man.
If we want to keep telling stories from Daniel's youth, I missed my critical speech period when I was a baby, which is like from birth to like 3, when you're hearing all the words and learning how to speak.
You missed it.
I missed it. We lived in Michigan for the first year of my life before moving to Idaho, and I was born in January. My birthday is this month. Birthday month.
Oh,
it's very exciting.
By the way, Happy New Year.
Thank you.
For anyone listening, it's January 3rd. This will probably be out in a month from now. No.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that timeline's right. Yeah, so I missed my critical speech period. Born in January in Michigan. It was frozen. I got an ear infection almost immediately, and then had terrible ear infections for the next 3 years of my life. And so I could speak, I just didn't know English. So like English is like legitimately my second language. I had to go to speech therapy for 3 years to learn English because I spoke literally a baby gibberish language that only my brother understood, which was super adorable, and like familial languages are bananas. So I would, say nonsense, and my mom would be like, "What do you want?" And my brother would be,
Are you? Can you lip read very well? Is that a weird consequence? No. Okay.
Because I
just
will.
messed
So
you
like
up.
my problem was I didn't know what words were. So like headphones, I didn't know that they were called headphones. I thought they were called soupy doop or whatever. And like
That is adorable. I'm gonna call these soupy dupes from now on.
so it was just endlessly wrong words for years. And so now I have like a set of words that I have a hard time saying. The biggest one and the one that pops up the most is I say it like a British person because I can say aluminium, easy breezy. But my mouth can't make the shape to say aluminum, aluminum, aluminum. If I say a single word over 3 seconds, I can do it. But like just in casual conversation, I have to sound like Johnny Ive. And anonymity is also one of those words.
It's also a word that isn't like a regular daily part, I'm assuming, of conversation.
Let's never talk about sea anemones again. Let's just never do it.
Well, it's just the idea of a single sign-on thing. I always, I think, actually, it was Glass was one of the biggest first apps that I came across where it was only Apple. And I just found like, oh yeah, this solves so many problems for them. I'm kind of shocked more people haven't launched like newer apps with just this. I mean, obviously it really narrows your window of users, but it just seems like it would solve so many things. And all of this stuff just keeps surfacing as what is the internet going to look like in the next 10 years is companies try or be either held accountable or find ways to solve all the issues that they are having to deal with and sometimes caused or whatever. Another one, which I have, this is all kind of starting to tie together now, is the idea of, okay, so let's tackle it from the other side. Most networks, social networks, like the value and the work is done by the users and who they engage with and who they decide to like on Instagram. And the social graph is built by you, the user, aside from maybe TikTok, where it's a little bit, we don't even need to get into that. But most social networks, up until maybe TikTok, your social graph is something you made. I feel like that should be somehow standardized and owned for users to, there's a new app called Glass. Boom, I want to transfer my social graph of users and followers that I built for 10 years on Instagram right on over to my new Glass profile. And as people come and sign up for Glass or not, they are auto-populated with the same network that they have. Because what's happening right now is way too much power and ability for companies to just do whatever they want because they know people aren't going to sacrifice a decade or two of work building these. And anyway, I remember hearing about the phrase like social graph and this idea, very lightweight, not very evolved through just another tech writer many years ago. And I never heard anything else about it. And I'm curious if you've ever
So there
come
are there are startups. God, I hate this. So there are startups that are trying to solve that, right? Who, have like taken some VC funding and are now effectively trying to get laws passed that you have to be able to take your social graph. Cool. So there are a couple of problems with it from a technical standpoint. From a like normal standpoint, I'm all in, right? Like hell yeah.
Business standpoint, though, I have to.
I mean, I'm all in there too, right?
We create a lot more competition.
we built Glass with the ability to export all your photos, to delete your account, like export everything. If and when we ever release like an email feature or whatever, we'll let you take your email list with you, right? Like email lists do this already. It's wonderful. It is, like Instagram has literally everything you've ever done ever in a...
Have you ever done an export of your account? They let you do that. It's like a data dump of
everything.
Yeah.
I have not.
I don't think it includes
right
deleted
now.
things. It's been a while. I think you can do it through mobile, or maybe you have to do it through web. There's some weird, like they clearly don't want you to, but yeah, they'll send you like a 7-8 part huge multi-gigabyte download of every conversation you've had, every
That's wild.
piece of media. Yeah, Facebook as well. Anyway, there's nothing you can do with it. You can just kind of browse it. You can't
Right. It's
take it
wild
with you.
so like they know literally everything about us, but they can't include someone's email in there to take it with them. Right.
Yeah.
They know everyone I've ever kissed, but you can't. So does LinkedIn, which is always weird to me. Right. Like I will open LinkedIn and it'll be like the suggested people to connect with. It'll be like, multiple people that I have never worked with but know and have seen somewhere, or like someone I made out with at a party, or I hate it. So like the amount of information and data buying between all of these companies is like terrifying. And like there's always like once a year we have the Instagram's listening to, like Instagram's turning on the microphone and listening to your conversations. Like conspiracy theory that floats around, and like, no, they're not. It's way worse, right? Like they are tracking literally every click and every point and every keystroke that you put on the internet anywhere. Doesn't matter if it's not on Instagram, it's literally everything, right?
Yeah,
like
it can be as simple as them obviously monitoring your DMs, and you may talk about a gift, the idea for somebody or something you're thinking about buying, and the person on the other end of the conversation may Google that as like a thing that they're researching without you realizing it, and somehow that gets tied back to a geolocation of where they live, and suddenly through some random what seems coincidental, their
Right.
husband is now after like you're right. They are tracking things so insanely that it seems like magic that they must be listening, and they don't even have to. Which is quite scary.
Yeah,
But
it's actually it's so much worse than listening to conversations, right? Because like you can't
the
gain a lot
technology
of...
to do that, like the tech to build that, is so insanely complex. It seems that they could be willing to give up, creating a transferable social graph and still be a very profitable business, and then would also have some kind of incentive to compete and improve way faster
They don't
than...
want that.
Yeah.
They don't want that. No one wants that. If you're a tech incumbent, nobody wants that, because they make all their money from selling our information. They don't make their money from anything else, which is a huge bummer.
I would love to be, pointed toward any of these startups that are trying to solve that issue. Seems like really the only thing that has even come close up till now is having to give an app access to your contact list on your phone.
Yeah, that was
That's it.
everybody was doing that. Do you remember the 2000? God, it was 2010. The Path lawsuit that's still going on, that's still tying up
No.
things. So
Never.
Path was a competitive social network that was trying to beat Facebook back in like 2008, 9, 10, 11, something like that. It was founded by Dave Morin, who was early Facebook. Wonderful designer, really great at designing networks. They capped it at 150 friends. You could only have 150 connections. It was more private. It was a little bit easier to connect with folks, and it was beautiful. Like just light years ahead of anything Facebook was doing at the time. It's like it would be like comparing like version 1 of Instagram to what Glass is now, right? Like the level of quality of design and intention and care that went into things. And there are so many different little things that like are now pretty standard for iOS and app interactions that were started with Path. Like when you would hold down a plus button, you see this on like Pinterest now. When you hold down a button, it like populates the buttons around your thumb. That's from Path. So like a bunch of little beautiful interactions like that were like created by Path. But they were also the first, even though everyone was doing it, they were the first company that was found to be uploading your contacts without permission. So Facebook, Instagram, Gowalla, Foursquare, everybody was doing it, but Path was the one that was discovered and then sued, and then there's a class action lawsuit, and then if you were doing it, you were lumped into that class action lawsuit. It's still going on. It's a huge bummer. That's also why there's now the modal that pops up whenever someone, like the Apple modal, is like, hey, are you sure you want to upload your contacts? That's because of this unfortunate thing that Path did. But it was like... the best.
Beautiful app. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I didn't realize. It's a shame when something, so elegant and well designed has had a bad run, just in terms of pure luck or business or just wrong place, wrong time.
I like it's one of those things that, like, if Path came out today and was like, oh yeah, you have to pay $5, I'm pretty sure it would be a nice indie business in the same way that Glass is, right? Like, it's just a lovely little thing. But it is long gone. R.I.P.
I'm sorry, Path. It freaks me out, honestly, that starting to have existed quite what is starting to feel like a long time, as a human, starting to feel my age, and seeing how many apps have gone by the wayside or are no longer supported and were really great and are now dead. It's tough to feel like, for example, have we ever talked about Superhuman?
No.
Are you familiar with
was that the fancy email
thing
that cost money? Yeah.
Yes, $30 a month. It's literally just an app that sits on top of Gmail already. And it's tough to think about something as intimate and necessary and daily, an app like email, right? I put so much time and energy into like making my workflow with email work. I would be completely crushed if Superhuman eventually went out of business, just like I was totally crushed when it wasn't Polymail. It was some other app that I think Dropbox acquired.
Yeah, Mailbox. R.I.P.
Beautiful app. And, this is why I'm thinking of this. January 1st. You know which app just got killed? And I'm so intimately familiar, so useful, so clutch on a wedding day where I don't know if I'm going to have 10 minutes or not. Like you developed, it was so well designed, Dark Sky, that you developed an almost intuitive sense of like, yeah, this is going to be accurate. It's going to start raining. Let's get out of here, or it's going to taper off. Like it was wonderful. And Apple, unfortunately, acquired good for the developers. They already, a year ago implemented pretty much everything I'm sure they're going to from Dark Sky into their new weather app. And it's a little bit better, but it's nothing like the original Dark Sky. And it's pretty disheartening to have to deal with the reality of these apps that you kind of start to base your entire life around. I can't even imagine some of the more kind of productivity to-do based like apps that have gotten acquired. And what was that one, Evernote, I used to use quite a lot, and something happened with them. Maybe they acquired a bunch of other people and then screwed the product. It's frustrating. This is why, though, I'm a big supporter. Oh my gosh, this episode is all over the place, but I am a big supporter. Maybe we can put a pin in this as a topic of subscription-based apps, and why I'm happy to pay $30 a month for Superhuman. As an email app, even though it literally just sits on top of Gmail. It's a such better experience for me in the way my mind works. I want that company to continue to exist and iterate and not be acquired. Take my $30. Just don't go away. It's worth it.
I'm gonna create a $30 a month Glass plan right now.
Yes. This is things that are that good, earn their place in your budget, or they should. And things that are free or things that you purchase once, that's fine. I can understand like wanting to own a product, but unfortunately in the world of technology, new processors are developed and code needs to be completely rewritten and things need to evolve. The version of Lightroom you paid a couple $100 for 8 years ago, you shouldn't expect it to work on the new. It's bad, yes. It doesn't have any new features, and you shouldn't expect it to work on Apple Silicon. It's old. That's how it goes.
So yeah. I am. I posted in this on my last, my end of year post on Glass, talking about like the state of the internet. I struggle a lot on Glass with like sharing how much of my like personal self to share, because I'm, one of the 3 people building it. I
Sure.
my tone and my personality has like an outsized impact on the community, even though, like it's not nearly as much as it would have been a year ago. We have more users, we have more large members, but it's still like it kind of matters, right? If someone on the platform that's building the thing is like, man, I don't know, internet's kind of trouble. We're in trouble. So like I use, but I talked about how I use like pessimism as a protective response because of my experience growing up queer in Idaho, and what that, like being pessimistic is and nihilistic is just like my protective mechanism. And it's also a very normal response. So I use pessimism as a protective mechanism. Like it comes from being queer, growing up in Idaho, and like being pretty nihilistic about the world and pessimistic about the world. But that's also a pretty logical response to the last like 5 or 10 years on the internet, right? Like things have gotten worse, and like they're only gonna get worse, right? Like we were in a VC powered boom where Uber rides were $2 and free delivery everywhere, and now they have spent their money. They have killed local unions, and they have like done the land grab, the power grab of market share, and now it's time for them to earn money. And so like I'm very worried about the state of the internet and the future of the internet in general. It's one of the reasons that we work on Glass so hard and spend so much time on it, is like this is our opportunity to make a little corner of the internet better. But it's really hard to know how much of myself to share on the platform that I'm running while also feeling this way, right? Of like, I'm like really skeptical that the internet's gonna
make it.
Well, I mean, like the underlying technology and like interconnectability is going to make it, but like, I don't know if we're going to be able to pull back from the $5 billion, $1 trillion companies that run everything, right? Like, I don't know if we're going to get enough solidarity among that section of the ruling class to like succeed in having the internet, right? Like transferable social graphs would be part of that. A privacy bill of rights. Because right now, these tech companies literally know everything about you. Like I cannot express how much data they have per person everywhere in the Western world.
I think a great way it was explained to me once. Can I interrupt? I don't want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're getting on a nice roll, but I do want to point out a way for maybe more normal people to think about it. Is think about your phone, right? And your phone is actually probably your most valuable asset. Your phone knows more about you than you do, not just because it's controlled by a tech company. Even if it was completely detached from the internet, it would still have a record of everywhere you were and everything you did that you could never accurately recall yourself. And that's just your phone. This is something that you are, like your calendar, your iMessages. These are interactions you have direct control over and are generally aware of. And we just stated 20 minutes ago about how terrifying they can track you for advertising purposes at companies without you. Supposedly TikTok and other apps will track your eyes and where you're looking on the screen to also try and manipulate and then shape things to what you want or what they think you want. And just at a very basic level, think about how much smarter your phone is than your own mind at knowing who you are and what you've done. And now take that and put it as an entire platform or an entire company. And I would say that, that's quite an accurate.
You're also missing adding on a layer of machine learning and false AI, right? Because like AI doesn't exist. It is just people writing programs, right? Like these are just incredibly complex.
What are the layers of AI? It's the next is, so it's like general AI is the next layer where I think a lot of people think we are at, and we're not. It's there's 3 or so, whatever the theory is.
Right, like
now.
these are fancy chatbots.
Yeah, exactly.
And so but they're programmed by people, by majority rich white men, right? Like the programmers that are building these algorithms and building these machine learning things that we are interacting with and calling AI are not, like AI is an incredibly powerful tool for, you,
Yeah,
right?
it
Like
was
you edit
well,
your.
it was machine learning for years, and that got beat to death so quickly that they just kind of jumped into AI as the marketing term, just because I think
Well,
it's
it's because VCs wanted to invest in AI. We went from chatbots to machine learning to AI, and then we spun back around to something else. I don't remember. Ugh,
yes.
I'm a terrible
So
VC. I should be
the
better at this.
general like layers of AI, because I gave a talk about brief overview during a keynote presentation when I was talking about the AI as it relates to photography. Narrow intelligence, which is where we are and where we've been and continue to be, general intelligence, and then super intelligence. General intelligence is what I think a lot of people feel like AI is now, but it's the hypothetical ability of an intelligent agent to understand or learn for itself any intellectual task that a human being can. And you're right, that doesn't happen when everything is still being programmed by programmers,
Yeah.
which is exactly what's happening with all these chatbots and mid-journey art generation and all of these things. That's why when they make a version upgrade to Mid-Journey and everything looks way better, it's not the machine having learned it. It's them dialing in their model.
Well, don't forget
Manually
about
to
all
some
the
degree.
new art that they've stolen, which is why so many fake
Totally different
watermarks show
topic.
up in the
I'm
corners.
very interested in discussing that in more detail, but it's I think still almost too early to even get started because it's so new, and yeah,
So at the end
controversial.
of the day, I'm very worried about the internet, and it's a very hard thing to like talk about being worried about the internet when I'm also helping build the internet, and I've been existing on the internet for like 25 years now. As a kid, the internet was a place where we went, right? Like you had to go to the internet. It wasn't a thing that you were always on all the time, everywhere in your pocket, and there was a limited number of places you could go, right? Like there. It's not like YouTube still existed or eBaum's World or whatever. Like there was endless content to be found, but you didn't have a way to navigate it very well, and your interests kind of ran out, right? Like you could run out of things to do. Even in like the mid 2000s, you could be like, well, I've looked at my 12 photo blogs and my 3 gear blogs, and now I'm done. Right? Like I'm done with the internet today. Now it is just a constant forever there.
The other company who would be able to make a meaningful change on that front is, again, Apple, or really any of the hardware manufacturers. One thing I've always been frustrated with is when they started to roll out most of their tools as the screen time, I think is their branding for it, where you could
Yeah.
get a sense of, hey, you've been on your phone for 90 hours today. It's impossible, and yet you still did it. How? These tools, they kind of give you feedback, and as a family, if you're a parent, you can lock down your kids' phones to a certain degree. I'm sure there's plenty of ways around that, but what would be incredible, and I think a huge step in a positive direction, would be one of the platform OS platforms like Apple with iOS to make a very adult, very mature feature of an actual phone lockout, an actual one that cannot be overridden. I think that would benefit a ton of people. One of my favorite products I ever bought, like 4 years ago, was this kitchen safe that had a unoverridable lock that you set the timer, it locks, and you can take the batteries out, you can do whatever you want. You have to break it if you want back into that thing. And it's very, very useful because these things are taking advantage of that was kind of branded as a food thing, which I think plenty of people can relate to, is very difficult to have self-control over. And that's just
Yeah.
something that right? These devices that we've talked about in other episodes exploit kind of dark magic of making things jiggle and move in a way that manipulates your dopamine levels. Plenty of people have issues that they would need a hard blockout like that and would be very well served. Maybe a situation where emergency only, you can still get on your phone, but everything else is locked down for a predetermined amount of time, no matter what. I would love to see a feature like that. Like these are problems that can be solved. And Apple, obviously they don't want their devices to not be used, but that would be an interesting one to lead that charge. Anyway, I'm just throwing all kinds of ideas out right now.
you new year full of ideas. Sorry we didn't have any overarching theme. The internet, we're worried about it. Please,
but that would do a heck of a lot of good, and I think a lot of adults would be willing to assume the responsibility of like, my phone, I need it right now to do something important, but I made the decision to have it locked out until tomorrow morning. I'm going to have to find another way to solve this problem. And then you do it, just like everybody did before phones existed. You continued to find a way to solve the problem. You went and borrowed someone else's phone to make a call because you can't remember their number, whatever. Yeah, it's...
We should definitely talk about our phone addictions in a later episode because I can talk about that all day. But, I've got it. I've got one. It's bad. I hate it. It's also,
Did you ever try the, I know we're getting a little long here. Did you ever try the, I think it was called, it's not related to the original Palm, but there's a Palm phone and then there's the Light phone. Palm is an Android-based, really super tiny phone. And the Light phone is an e-ink phone. I have both, and they're nice. They're quite good, but they just, one or two key features I can't, like especially navigation, that I just can't live without. So
I don't know if I can ever go back to T9 texting. That's
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure I can, but like
the Light phone does have a full keyboard, but the e-ink isn't the best experience. Still, it's all black and white, and I bring it with me when I travel just as an emergency backup because the battery lasts like a week, which is nice.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
Well,
you said a ton of things that I'm going to have to get better about coming up with a way to keep notes because I hate interrupting. I will when I need to, but you say so many different things I want to create tangents on or put a pin in for other episodes. Oh. It's a scary time. I have no doubt, like you said, it's going to get a little bit worse. Hopefully just a little worse before it gets better.
That's very brave of you to think that it's only going to be a little bit.
One thing I will say, right now everyone's talking about banning TikTok, which I absolutely think they should. We can talk about that if you don't at another point. TikTok did kind of dethrone very, very quickly the Instagram, Facebook, I would say mostly, and YouTube, like all of these other networks, like quite fast because they had an incredibly manipulative algorithm that hooked people in. And so that in a way does give me hope that the market is still level enough for new apps to come in and create a meaningful competitive landscape.
But let's not pretend that TikTok was just a small upstart coming in as opposed to a massive tech company backed by the Chinese government.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
Which is, again,
they spent record amounts of money to acquire everything they did and manipulated everyone in all kinds of weird ways to thinking they were getting viral reach even though they weren't, and blah, blah, blah. And they acquired it as it was originally called like Musical.ly or something, and it was sort of the guts of it were the same. But it was a complete failure until, they started to just buy their way into success. That's true. Yeah.
And there's there is a lot of unfortunate xenophobia that happens because, Chinese government has a large stake in,
I've tried to get better about explicitly saying CCP now instead of China, because you're right. That is, I think CCP is a much better way to kind of buffer that and be sensitive to the fact
but
it's
Chinese also people. But that's what's happening with Facebook and with Instagram. We want our addicting data mining propaganda machines to be in charge and winning, not someone else's. And it's like, no. I would prefer pass. We've gone too long
altogether. Sure.
Let's
yeah.
let's wrap it up.
My back and forth on this at a basic level is we should start with at least having reciprocal agreement. So, if Facebook and Google search are banned in China, then TikTok and WeChat or whatever else they use in China, that's a huge, huge deal. I think it's WeChat. It's not WhatsApp.
Yeah,
it's the Chinese
it's
and then that should be
what's
banned.
run by.
And yes, yeah. And if they then want access, like I think that is a very reasonable, logical thing, instead of having this one way of directing it. But we can have an entire episode on that. And then
we also don't get further by just going back and forth banning each other's companies when like that doesn't solve any of the problems.
No, that's a very good point. I agree. Except that it should be banned. But anyway, for other reasons that I'm not even going to get into that. But
boop, and we're done. All right. Well, see you next week, everybody. Boop. Where's the?
We need at least one potential name to
oh my
round
god!
this.
To wrap it up, man, I just don't like any of these options. Vibes.
Hearts cereal.
Heart cereal. Vibes. Vibe. Accidental. I don't know. Not S-Town. Hey everybody! Thanks for coming in to another. We can't say that. That's definitely copyrighted. That's
what's
an
happening?
NPR
My
show.
keyboard is totally screwed. But it is real time updating as you're updating. That's funny. Can we not both edit different sections of the?
I guess we're in the same section.
View.
Who can say?
What about ViewPod?
You're gonna edit out these last 10 minutes entirely. You're just gonna
it autocorrected
be like
viewed.
Done. I don't know. Well, let's do the.
Are you pulling up an AI chatbot to ask it what it could be called?
No, because I don't fuck with AI, man.
For you.
That's not gonna help.
It's so useful for just the stupidest stuff. Like, here's a thing of text, make it all lowercase. Like, that is what I'm finding it very useful for.
Dude, oh my god, is that a branding choice? Do you write with capital letters normally and then paste it into?
No. But like one of my devices randomly, I can't remember which freaking one it is. I think it's my MacBook, because I do enough email that I try and auto capitalizes correctly, and I prefer to not. I don't know why. Just always done that.
See, I always capitalize because I was pretending to be a mid-20s gay when I was like 12 on the internet. So I used proper punctuation all the time to sound older.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah, I don't know why I started doing that. I remember realizing it was weird when actually it was Apple was going through a huge PR like turmoil, and they got rid of their outsourced firm. It was like a very famous PR advertising firm. I can't remember their name. And they took everything in-house. And I remember reading through some of there was somebody got sued for something related to it, and a bunch of the emails came out, and people were mentioning how like the guy who was in charge of whatever company they had outsourced their marketing to, at least a lot of their marketing, was always talking to these like Apple execs in all lowercase in a very casual manner. And I was like, oh shit, that's exactly how I write. Is this a problem? Should I not do this? Yeah, it was kind of funny to me, but it lodged in my head like a decade ago that might be not how everybody talks.
Shutter shenanigans.
Ooh.
Shutterbugs. The lens.
Whatever it is, it needs to be easily spellable, and I don't think shenanigans is for most people.
That's fair. Snapchat. Hey.
I don't hate focal point. I don't hate that. Just gonna say, it kind of works.
Kind of. I mean, yeah. No, that's pretty good. That's not bad.
Works. It's not too photography, but it's also not. Yeah,
that can be. Let's sign off with focal point, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode of Focal Point. Please tune in next week when it will be called something entirely different. I'm Daniel. That's Sam. Thanks for coming.
Happy New Year. It's been lovely.
Happy New Year. Boop.